Welcome to the Gargles channel. Thanks for watching today. Today we're going to do a tier list ranking of all the Game Boy games on Nintendo Switch Online service because they finally came to their senses and gave us the Game Boy and the Game Boy Advance. And we're going to take a specific look at the Game Boy today because it's just like one of my all-time favorite systems. I love the system. And if you're interested in the Game Boy, be sure and click the playlist up above where we're going to journey through and finish or beat every single Game Boy game. And it's going to take a few years to go through it, but it's a little commentary on literally every single Game Boy game that's out there. But let's go and get back into the tier list ranking of the ones on the online service. Now, first up, we have probably one of the most iconic Game Boy games of all time, and one's most associated with the Game Boy because they're like literally packaged with it when it first came out, and that's going to be Tetris. And Tetris, there's no doubt, this is like one of the best puzzle games that ever existed. Me personally, I am more on the Dr. Mario side, but I have to acknowledge that Tetris is a ton of fun, and I did put many hours into it growing up. I had actually the NES version before the Game Boy version, so I probably put more hours in the NES version than the Game Boy one, but regardless, both fantastic games. It's a wonder why they didn't put Tetris DX on the Game Boy Online service though, because I mean it's pretty much the same game with just like extra features and whatnot. But regardless, Tetris, I mean it would normally be just because it's so iconic, like an S tier game. But since there is the DX version out there, they didn't include. And also, since I'm more of a Dr. Mario fan as well, I'm not going to put it as an S tier ranking, but I'm going to put it at a solid A tier game. Now next up we have pretty much a technical marvel on the Game Boy, and that's going to be Alone in the Dark. Now this game, I know by today's standards we're like, oh, it doesn't look all that great, but at the time, a 3D game like this on the Game Boy that looked pretty similar to its console counterpart, I mean, that was amazing. Now I never actually beat Alone in the Dark, I just played on some friends' devices here and there, and it was really more just sort of show off like, hey, look how great this Game Boy game looks. Now there was a fine game underneath that, it's not like a bad game or a broken game, but most of the time when you talk about this game, it really was just sort of show off like how good the Game Boy could look, what it could handle, and I really think that's probably why they include it on this service, just to sort of show like the range of what the Game Boy could do, Tetris all the way to Alone in the Dark. And so, I mean, to me personally, I don't find myself wanting to go back and like try to finish the game, but I mean, I will at some point because I'm going through all those Game Boy games and finishing them all. But for right now, I'm going to put Alone in the Dark as a C ranking, just because it feels more like a tech demo or a technical marvel or showing off the technology of the Game Boy, more so than the full-fledged game. Even though I know there's a game in there, most of the time when we think about it, it's in association with how good the Game Boy can look. And up next we have Super Mario Land 2, 6 golden coins, and when I was a kid, I could not wait to get this game. I was so excited when I got my Game Boy. Actually, I got this game before Super Mario Land, and I was so excited for it. And I have to say, like when I actually played the game, and a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this, but I didn't necessarily love the game. And what I didn't like about it is it gave me like a weird feeling as a kid. Like when I was a kid, I watched the movie Alice in Wonderland, and that movie always gave me sort of like a creeped out feeling. I just didn't like it. And when I play Super Mario Land 2, it has a similar like feeling to me. And that's the best way I can describe this game is it gives me a feeling that I just don't really it just sort of creeps me out a little bit. And it's not like a scary game. Don't think that at all. But it just makes me feel. It's just a weird feeling. I don't know. I can't say it's a bad game because it's not a bad game. But I just don't like the landscapes. I don't like the little rabbit hat, the little floaty device or floaty ears on it. There's a lot of things I don't really care for, but I can't say it's a bad game. And I know some people would say it's like a perfect S tier game, one of the Mario's greatest. And it's definitely good looking. The graphics are good. The gameplay is solid. But for me personally, just on my personal experience, I'm going to put it as a B tier game just because I don't have the greatest memories with the game, but I have to acknowledge it's still a good game. Next up, we have Metroid 2 Return of Samus, and to me, this was always like the Metroid game that sort of put on the map to begin with, because I never really liked the NES Metroid, because I always got confused in it, I always got lost in it, I didn't know where to go, and I just really got frustrated with the original Metroid. But Metroid 2 seemed more streamlined, more straightforward, and it really just seemed like a better game as an overall. I don't find myself like going back to play it a whole lot though, and so I'm going to put it as a B tier ranking game. But I do think it's a really good game. I just don't think it's quite on the level of like A or S tier. Anti-Knuckles here. As I was capturing footage for Metroid 2, I actually realized I like this game a good bit better than I realized. So I'm actually moving from a B tier up to A tier. Still not S tier, but it's not B tier either. It's an A tier game. Sorry about that. Now next up we have Kirbys Dreamland, which is pretty much the Kirby game that started it all. I mean, even on the box art here, they didn't know what color they wanted to make Kirby, so it's actually just a little white blob instead of a pink blob. And so this is like the first Kirby game, but it's not like truly Kirby in every aspect, because he doesn't have the ability to actually copy his enemy's powers. And so like all the other Kirby stuff is there, but he can't copy the powers. And so it's not like the most iconic Kirby game. If you're looking for like one of those, I'd probably go with Kirbys Dreamland 2 or Kirby's Adventure on the NES. Those are both like traditional Kirby, got all the regular powers. And so to me, I'd probably put Kirby It's not a bad game, it's just a very straightforward platformer at this point, but it's still a good game, so I put it as a B ranking. If you'd like to see a full breakdown of like to complete Kirby game, check out the link up above, and I did a full breakdown as we were journeying through and finishing all the Game Boy games, so feel free to click that Kirby link up above. And next up we have one of my top 5 favorite games of all time, and that's going to be Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. It may actually be like my favorite Zelda game. I absolutely love this game. I had it on the original Game Boy, and when it came out on DX, I actually bought the Game Boy Color just to get the DX version. And I have so many great memories of this game, of the original game. I still find myself playing through it about once every year or two. The Switch remake was fantastic. It was great. But there's something about the 8-bit charm of the original Link's Awakening that I just can't get enough of. And to me, this is like a perfect game in every way. And so it is 100% an S tier game, and there's almost no other Game Boy game that's going to beat it. And then we have the Game & Watch Gallery Part 3, and I know some people will say these games are just sort of simple games. They don't want to play them a whole lot because they're just so one-dimensional, but I love these games. I had them on the Game Boy growing up, and I always just loved trying to beat my high score. And there's some really great games in this particular one. I mean, the one where Yoshi like shoots a little watermelon seeds out, has to collect more watermelons, shoot more seeds out. That's a really fun game on here. I like the Donkey Kong Jr. one on here. There's just some really fun games on the Game & Watch Gallery Part 3, and I understand they're simple, but I have a special place in my heart for simple games. I just love them, and so to me, it's not an S tier game because there's just not quite enough depth on it, but it's definitely an A tier game to me, and I just love the Game & Watch Gallery games. And next up we have Gargles Quest, and to me this is one of those hidden gem Game Boy games because not a lot of people have played it, but it is just such a great quality game. I just recently gave it a complete playthrough, and I've enjoyed it literally start to finish. The enemies are great in it, the action is great in it for the 2D part, the exploration of the overhead view, that's fantastic in it as well. It's based upon the Ghost and Goblins Demon Firebrand from that. There's also a sequel, Gargles Quest 2, which I actually did have growing up, and love that on the NES. Demon's Crest is also a sequel on the SNES. And but Gargles Quest is like where this particular branch of Firebrand or this particular branch of Ghost and Goblins really got its start. And there's really not enough great that can be said about this game. It's definitely above the rest of the A tier games. It's not only quite the same level as Link's Awakening, because that's like, I mean, it's Link's Awakening, but it's definitely an S tier game. And if you haven't given Gargles Quest a try, it's definitely one of the best Game Boy games out there. And last but not least, we have Wario Land Part 3. And this game in particular I never had growing up, but I did play on friends' devices pretty often. And the mechanics were always really solid on it, the graphics were really great on it, and there's definitely a charm to Wario Land Part 3. And it's not just your normal run-of-the-mill platformer. There's, some little puzzles to figure out, some, different mechanics in it. And it's overall a good game from what I've played. And I actually want to go back and completely finish Wario Land Part 3. And so when it comes to ranking it, B or A, I mean, I haven't finished it and I've not played a whole lot of it, so I almost hate to put it as an A tier, but I hate to put it as a B tier because I found myself wanting to go back and finish it. And so I'm going to go ahead and put it as an A tier, but that game right there could change a little bit depending on how my full playthrough is of the game. But how would you rank all these Game Boy games? Would you put them in the same rankings as me? Which one would you put as S tier? Which one would you put as D tier? I didn't put any as D tier. Would you put any as the D tier? Let me know in the comments down below. And like I said earlier, if you want to join through the journey of finishing every single Game Boy game, beating them from start to finish, click the link up above and join as we adventure through every single Game Boy game. But as always, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel and go out there, find a great game to play, and simply have a great rest of the day.